I'm going to ask if you would to go with me to Numbers chapter 22. Numbers chapter 22. I am going to be reading from verse number 9 to verse number 13. This is going to be a little weighty. This series is going to be a little lengthy. This is going to take some time to get through, but I pray that today would be the introduction into the series that we're going into. I'm just going to read, and if you would, for those of you that can with me in this room, if you would stand with me as I read the word of God. Reading starting at verse number 9, it says, "Then God came to Balaam and said, 'Who are these men with you?' So Balaam said to God, 'Balak, the son of Zippor, king of Moab, has sent to me, saying, Look, a people has come out of Egypt, and they cover the face of the earth. Come now, curse them for me. Perhaps I shall be able to overpower them and drive them out.' And God said to Balaam, 'You shall not go with them. You shall not curse them, the people, for they are blessed.' So Balaam rose in the morning and said to the princes of Balak, 'Go back to your land, for the Lord has refused to give me permission to go with you.'" I'm taking for a subject this morning, when God says no. You may be seated. When God says no. I have read just a few verses. For those of you who love to read your Bible, I'm going to ask if you would to just read verses 1 through the entire chapter of 2022. And it will probably take you even further because this text is very weighty. But I believe that in this very moment, God is speaking to all of us at this very time in our lives. For many of us, some of us suffer great traumatic experiences by just simply hearing one word. And that one word is no. When we hear the word no, that to many of us can be very definitive. No tells you have no parameters outside of that to be able to move as you please. No is known as a negative connotation. It has a negative response to it. All of us, when we hear no, we automatically think of rejection. We automatically think of being turned away. No, for many of us, is deafening. It is loud. It is something that we focus clearly on when it is spoken. I want to say this, that for me, no can take me all the way back to my childhood at the age of 15. At the age of 15, and my desire to believe that God had called me to do something that he had equipped me with. I believed as a young boy that I was the fastest in my own neighborhood. Growing up in the projects, I was known for my speed. I was known for my quick agility. I was known for my hands to be able to catch a football in the neighborhood. At that point where, in believing that as my best friend would become the star quarterback going right into our sophomore year out of junior high school, and believing that he and I would become the tandem, the 1-2 punch, that he would be the quarterback and I myself would be the receiver or the running back. And anticipation of going to try out for the football team, there was a prerequisite at that time, which was there had to be some permission given. And that permission had to be given by the parent. It could not be verbal. It had to be written, and it had to be signed and documented that your parent had approved for the decision for you to play. I don't know if y'all can remember that, but it wasn't like it is. You know, I didn't grow up in Texas, where Texas is a good big sports town where everybody is rallying around the kids in whatever event it is. But I grew up in Las Vegas in the projects. I was very thin and skinny, but at the same time, I could take a hit as well as give a hit. But it's on this occasion that I would anticipate a yes. Running home to my mother after I had gotten word that tryouts were starting for the high school football team my first year. And I would run home on the words of my best friend, which is, man, let's get out here and let's get this. You go home and get your mom's approval. I already have mine. I'm waiting on you. It was with that anticipation that I would run home to my mother, excited of what I believed the future wrought for me. Getting home with the paper in my hand, I run into my mother's room and I'm talking, I'm stammering. For some reason, I don't know why I'm stammering, but I'm finding it difficult to get out of my mouth to say, Mama, I want to play football. I want to try out for the football team. Expecting and anticipating her to say yes. I'm standing there and I'm bracing, smiling with the paper in my hand, handing it out to her, only for her to look at me and say, no. It's at that moment that I am taken back, as if I did not hear what she had said. So I ask again, huh? She said, no. I'm sorry, but no. It's at that moment I felt like my life had just imploded. For those of you who are young, you can look back over your lives, over those things that you have just gone through in your life where you believe that this was the one avenue that you could access, but you don't have the cooperation of those that are closest to you to agree with you. You feel like your life is upended. I myself at that time felt the same way. I felt like that I was destroyed. My mother would go on to say no again. In the same moment, as I would start to shed tears and cry as a 15-year-old kid being devastated, I would start to make it audible, not just showing in tears, but go into a fit of crying. And she would rub on my back, still say, nope, I'm sorry. Cried the night through, thinking that God, you're going to make a way and you're going to change her heart. Wake up the next day to go in and say, Mama, please. Nope, nope, and nope. Feeling the more rejection, I would leave and go out, knowing that my best friend is waiting on me. At that time, we didn't have cell phones. So, you know, back then, they just waited on the corner for you. It's like, man, where were you yesterday? What happened today? Tryouts start today. And my response is, he can see it in my face, and he's like, your mama said no, huh? She said no. This series is going to be very weighty for many of us because no has very long-lasting implications. I still relive that no. In some form or way, I still relive that no because you always go back to what could have been, what could have happened, what you could have become, what your life would be now had they simply said yes. I look at it, and sometimes there is this feeling of regret. But God has been ministering to me, especially over this past couple of weeks, where he is reminding us that he is a God that loves us and that cares more about us than we could ever believe that anyone could care about us. And oftentimes what we expect is a yes to endorse where we want to go, when in fact what he wants to do is make sure that we're right in line with his purpose for our lives. Therefore, he must say no. In this text, I'm setting you up for this because Balaam, though you may not understand this, Balaam is having an interaction with those who know that he is a powerful man of God. He's a prophet. They know that when he speaks blessings and curses, it comes to pass. They know he has this power and ability to be able to prophesy over circumstance, and it materialized. Moab is a great enemy against the children of Israel. I won't take you into the weeds on this, but when the children of Israel were leaving Egypt and they were passing through this land, Moab, the Moabites were one of the territories that refused to allow them to gain access to get to where they were going. They wouldn't even let them cross their yard. They wouldn't let them jump the fence. They wouldn't let them just make a beeline so that their route could be shorter. They said no. From that moment on, they became a great enemy to the children of Israel. The Moabites here have come to Balaam. And the king and the ruler over the Moabites is Balak. Balak knows that he doesn't have an inroad to God, but he wants to prop up the man who can get things done by subverting and deviating and getting around God. So he wants to get around God by getting to one of God's men, which is Balaam. And he asked Balaam if Balaam would in fact, he says, look, we're in trouble. I'm in trouble. We're about to be attacked and we need help. They have more people than we do and we need help. I need you to pray a curse over them that they don't overtake us. Balaam says, let me go and ask God. Balaam can see that they have the finest of things. They very wealthy. They have influence. And he is going to God on their behalf because he desires to do just as they ask, but he knows he must be accountable to God. So Balaam runs to God. And when he gets to God, you see it in verse number 9, where God asks him, number 1, who are these men with you? Now, he's not asking them because he don't know who they are, but he's asking him, do you know who they are? You are palling around with people that are your enemy and you're making them your friends. You're willing to go out of your way for those that wish you harm. You're willing to convenience those who desire to kill and destroy you. You're willing to grant them their desire, though they desire to take yours away. Balaam says, well, this is what they came. This is my friend. If you read through the text, it's almost like, how we've done when our parents say, who is that? Who is that that's standing at my front door? Who is that waiting in the car for you? I don't know who they are. Who is that's my friend. My mother would say, your friend? What's his mama's name? What's his daddy's name? Do I know them? At this moment, God is saying, you don't even know them, and I don't have any dealings with them. But you're coming to me on their behalf. And he's like, yes. And he says, the people have come out of Egypt. He's telling the story, their story. They need him to be the mediator, so he's going to tell God their story because they can't tell God their story. He says, and they cover the face of the earth and come now to me to curse for them. Perhaps I shall be able to overpower. They say I should be able to overpower if, in fact, you can pray and drive them out. But here's the kicker right here. It says, and God said to Balaam, you shall not go with them. You shall not curse the people. For the very people that they're telling you to curse, I've already determined that they are blessed. At this moment, there's a shift. You got to see it because God says to Balaam, he says, you shall not go with them. You shall not curse the people, for they are blessed. It says, so Balaam rose in the morning and said to the princes of Balak. He says, I went to my daddy, and I tried to, get permission. He says, but you got to go back to your land, for the Lord has refused to give me permission to go with you. I've stopped there because it's going to take me some time to unpack this. As Balaam is now at a crossroads in his life where no is the absolute answer. He is going to have a problem by trying to get God to change his answer. Because Balak is not going to accept no as the final outcome. You will find in the text that as these princes go back to Balak and report that Balaam will not curse our enemy because his God won't let him, what Balak will do is he will send people with a greater reputation, people who have more influence, and he will send them back to him again to ask him once again, pleading with him once again, begging him once again, because they are in need of a victory. They're going to beg for anything they can get from Balaam in order that they may be victorious. Today, as you sit here, God has said no to you in a circumstance or a dilemma that you are currently facing right now. He has said no. And you're wanting to know, why can't I have it this way? You said, if I ask anything and praying and believing, you will grant it to me. Why won't you grant this? Because this is not favorable for you. But God, I can see how this can benefit me. Balaam at this moment is seeing the influence and how his ministry can be expanded and how he can have all the influence and how everybody will know him beyond his own territory. God is like, no, absolutely not. I'm going to jump ahead. I didn't intend to, but the Spirit of the Lord is telling me this so that you know. Balaam here gets the second response. And I want you to understand that God is a God of particulars and specifics. That when he says no, he means no. And we find that difficult because we believe that God hands us the gift bag every time we go to him and have a request, that he's going to grant what we ask. And God is reminding us that he is not the sugar daddy. He is not one that we rub on the top of the bottle and make a wish and then expect that when we wake up it will be manifested. Yeah. But God is the one who looks over. That's why we call him the overseer. Because he can stand over and see what's down the road, whereas you can only see what's around the corner. Balaam, in this text, he encounters them again. And I'm going to rehash this on next week, but I want you to see this, because as they have come back to him, it says in I'm just going to read verse number 18. Then Balaam answered and said, this is the second time the servants of Balak, this is the second time they've come back. Though Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not go beyond the word of the Lord, my God, to do less or more. Listen, you stop there and it sounds as if he is strong and firm in his decision to not do it. But literally, he's wavering now. And it says, now therefore, please, you also stay here tonight, that I may know that what more the Lord will say to me. And verse 20 says, and God came to Balaam at night and said to him, if the men come to call you, rise and go with them, but only the word which I speak to you, that you shall do. I need to read that again so you'll know. Verse number 20, and it says, if the men come to you and they come to call you, rise and go with you. Only if they come to call on you. You gotta see that. He says, only if they come to call on you. Only if they come to call on you. Then you go with them, but only the word which I speak to you, that is what you shall do. Check this out. So Balaam rose in the morning, saddled his donkey, and went. We read this text and we really don't see how particular God is. But God sets up a strategic plan by saying, only if they ask you. Yeah. Here we see Balaam anticipates that they're going to ask. And he saddles the donkey. And he goes off with them. I told y'all, I said his mind was already there. He was anticipating it. How do you know that? Because he wouldn't even wait for them to even ask him. He was eager to get out there. That's what we do. Y'all, Lord, if it's your will, shut the door. No, what we do is we don't even allow him to even shut the door before we take off, and we start to incorporate and embrace what we believe that God desires for us to have, only to find out that God is like, I didn't tell you that. Balaam, at this moment, has gone with them. I'm going to close out with this last verse. It says, then God's anger was aroused because he went. Let me say this. See, years ago, I was flummoxed over this because I couldn't see this. God had to open this up for me because I was like, well, you told him to go. And then a couple months ago, as I was reading this, the Lord opened it up. He's like, no, I didn't tell him to go. Go back and read it. It's in the details. I told him that if, in fact, they called upon him, then he was to go, but he still couldn't say anything. But he was so eager to go that he didn't wait. He took God's answer as a yes. How many of us, we get on our knees and we anticipate what God's answer is yes. We anticipate that it's going to be yes. I told y'all, I started out by telling you that I went to my mother and I anticipated that what she was going to say, there was no way she's not going to say yes. How is that? Because my mother knows how fast I am. She's seen me in the neighborhood playing football. She's seen me running. She understood that. But I anticipated all to get the no. Now you ask yourself, as we will traverse over this and understand when God says no, what it really means. We like to believe that when he says no, it is outright rejection. But really what this is absolute restoration. This is a building up. My mother probably didn't know. She probably didn't know, but she knew within herself that she couldn't let me do it. The excuse my mother gave me was, I can't let my baby get hurt. She tried to console me by using that as the reason for not letting me play football. I don't want you to, you're so small, I don't want you to get hurt. No, I just can't see you getting hurt. That wasn't giving me any consolation. I'm saying, let me get hurt. She's like, no. Little did I know that God had a greater plan for my life. Because when I look at the no and I think of what I could have been, on the other side, I look at the positives of what I could have been. On the negatives, I don't see that I could have been paralyzed, that I could have been dismembered, or I could have been killed. I could have been maimed. I could have been, unconscious. There could have been a myriad of things that I could go through that could have been. But it's in this, in understanding when God says no, he's not saying that you are denied success. He just said not success that way.